the residents of Vrindavan heard that Krishna and Balaram are in Kurukshetra. They're going to be in Kurukshetra. Well, golly, Kurukshetra is not too terribly far from Vrindavan. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting for Krishna to return to Vrindavan. He left with a Kura, and when he departed, he promised that he would return to Vrindavan. So we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. We can't even take our meals because the life of our life is not here. He's our pranana. He's the Lord of our life heirs. The residents of Vrindavan can't even take their meals. They can't even sleep at night. They're simply crying. No other activity. They don't eat. They don't sleep. They simply die. Then somehow or other they get a little message that Krishna and Balaram are going to Kurukshetra. So the residents of Vrindavan decide to pack up their wagons, and by golly, we're going to go to Kurukshetra and meet Krishna. He doesn't want to come here? Well, we'll go meet him. So they do that. They travel to Vrindavan. And when they get there, they certainly do meet Krishna. And they challenge him that, do you even remember us? Like, here we are, do you recognize us? What is your mom? Where's your dad? Do you even think about us when you're over there in the big city of Dwarka, being all worshipped and served by thousands of queens? Do you even think about us? And when Krishna sees the mood of the residents of Vrindavan, that, oh my gosh, they think I've forgotten about them. Their hearts are broken actually thinking that I forgot about them. And he feels terrible because it was not his intention to break their hearts. So Krishna speaks to Radharani. He says, my dearest Srimati Radharani, please hear me. I am speaking the truth. I cry day and night simply upon remembering all you inhabitants of Vrindavan. No one knows how unhappy this makes me. So Krishna is saying, you think you cry all day and night? Well, so do I. You don't understand how unhappy this separation makes me. Then he says, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan Dham, my mother, father, cowherd boyfriends, and everything else, are like my life and soul. And among all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, the gopis are my very life and soul. And among the gopis, you, Srimati Radharani, are the chief. Therefore, you are the very life of my life. Talk about winning her heart with sweet words. Prabhupada has a short purport. He says, Srimati Radharani is the center of all Vrindavan's activities. In Vrindavan, Krishna is the instrument of Srimati Radharani. Therefore, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan still chant, Jai Radhe. From Krishna's own statement given herein, it appears that Radharani is the queen of Vrindavan, and that Krishna is simply her decoration. Krishna is known as Madana Mohan, the enchanter of Cupid, but But Srimati Radharani is the enchanter of Krishna. Consequently, Srimati Radharani is called Madana Mohana Mohini, the enchanter of the enchanter of Cupid. So Krishna, Prabhupada makes a nice little statement here that Krishna is the instrument of Srimati Radharani in Vrindavan. Krishna is the instrument of Srimati Radharani. We always talk about how we pray, oh Krishna, please make me your instrument. Please use me in your service as an instrument. That means I don't have any false ego that I'm the doer, but rather just use me as an instrument. And here, Prabhupada is saying, Krishna in Vrindavan is the instrument of Srimati Radharani. And in fact, in another place, Krishna says that he just dances according to how Radharani tells him to dance, like a little bucking dance. So Prabhupada says that Radharani is the queen of Vrindavan, and Krishna is simply her decoration. Therefore, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, actually, our Sampradaya is extremely unique in that our worshipable object, ultimate object of service, is not God. We say we are servants of God, we are servants of God, we are servants of Krishna. But the Gaudiya Vaishnavas actually are unique amongst all religions and even amongst all Vaishnava sects, all Vaishnava paramparas, that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas actually have as their topmost object of worship and service Srimati Radharani. That Radhadasya, the service of Radharani, is considered the highest pinnacle of spiritual perfection. Therefore, in Vrindavan, Prabhupada says that even till today, even though we might go to Vrindavan and think there's so much, modern influence there and what have you, that even until today, the residents of Vrindavan, when they pass each other on the street, Jai Radhe, not Hare Krishna, Jai Radhe. So this is the actual position of Radharani. I want to look at another reference found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is going back to the Adi Lila chapter 4. And you'll go down to text 59. Here, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is explaining the glories of Lord Chaitanya and his position, his ontological position. And in order to do that, he needs to explain to the reader the glories of Radha and Krishna. So there, in text 59, Krishnadas Kaviraj says that Srimati Radhika is the transformation of Krishna's love. She is his internal energy called Hladini. So we commonly hear that Krishna has an internal potency, and that internal potency is delineated in 3 categories. He has the Sandhini potency, which is his existential potency. Then he has his Samvit potency, which is his cognitive potency. And then, most importantly, he has his Hladini potency, which is his pleasure potency. That potency, the only potency actually, which actually brings true pleasure to Krishna. And the personification of that Vladini potency is Radharani. So Radharani is the Vladini energy that gives Krishna pleasure and nourishes his devotees. That's the next verse, text 60. In his purport going down, Prabhupada is explaining how the impersonalists, they don't accept the loving potency of God. And therefore, they're impersonalists. Because without an internal pleasure potency, that means the potency of love, then one's not a person. Like this microphone is not a person. What is it lacking? It exists just like I exist. So we said Krishna has the Sandhini potency, which is his existential potency, that which brings things into existence or himself into existence. Then he has the Samvit potency, which is the cognitive potency. And then the Hladini potency, which is the pleasure potency or the potency of love. So the impersonalists do accept the Sandhini potency, the existential potency. And they even accept the Samvit potency, the potency of cognition. But they say that cognitive potency is like one big, ocean of cognizance. One ocean of consciousness. But the Vaishnavas accept the Hladini potency, which means the pleasure or loving potency, which requires more than one. To be conscious doesn't require more than one. And that's exactly what the Brahma Jyoti is, or the Brahman stage of realization, where one just becomes one with consciousness. But the Hladini potency requires more than one, because love is an exchange. I can't say, I'm experiencing love just all by myself. Love requires two, it's an exchange. There's a currency which is exchanged. So the Hladini potency necessitates the existence of the internal potency personified as Srimati Radharani. So in his purport, Prabhupada says, the impersonalist conclusion is against the Vedic version that the Lord possesses a transcendental pleasure potency. When the pleasure potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is exhibited by his grace in the person of a devotee, that manifestation is called love of God. Love of God is an epithet for the pleasure potency of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service reciprocated between the Lord and his devotee is an exhibition of the transcendental pleasure potency of the Lord. When I first started reading Prabhupada's books, I kept hearing Prabhupada say, love of God, love of God. The perfection of life is love of God. And I thought, oh, that's just his English. It's supposed to be love for God. So whenever I kept reading love of God, I was thinking love for God. Then I read this purport years later. I got around to the fourth chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and this purport. And Prabhupada says that when the transcendental pleasure potency of the Lord is exhibited by his grace in the person of a devotee. That manifestation is called love of God. In other words, love doesn't originate from us. Lord Chaitanya says that our heart is like a mirror. And that mirror, when it's dirty, cannot reflect properly. But when that mirror is clean, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, by the Harinam Sankirtan, when the heart, the mirror of the heart becomes cleansed, then it can reflect that which is shown on it. So when, by the grace of the Lord, his pleasure potency, Ladini potency, is bestowed upon the person of a devotee, that is called love of God. We simply reflect the love that originates in Krishna back to him. And in that way, we become lovers of God, lovers of Krishna. Srimati Radharani is that love of God. She is the Ashraya Vigraha. She is the reservoir of love. And Krishna is Vishaya Vigraha. He is the object of love. So when by his grace, that reservoir of love, just a particle of it, just a ray of sunshine, is bestowed upon the living entity, then that living entity experiences what we call love of God. So very important terminology, not love for God. Because we'll hear many people, religionists all around the world, talking about love for God. But that means it originates from us. And Prabhupada's making the point, it doesn't originate from us. So I'll just cruise down to text 68 and conclude with one point here. In text 68, Krishnadas Kaviraj says, the essence of the Ladini potency is love of God. The essence of love of God is emotion, bhava. And the ultimate development of emotion is mahabhava. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that the product of the Ladini Shakti is love of Godhead, which has two divisions, namely pure love of Godhead and adulterated love of Godhead. Only when the Ladini Shakti emanates from Sri Krishna and is bestowed upon the living being to attract him, Krishna, does the living being become a pure lover of God. But when the same Ladini Shakti is adulterated by the external material energy and emanates from the living being, it does not attract Krishna. On the contrary, the living being becomes attracted by the glamour of the material energy. At that time, instead of becoming mad with love of Godhead, the living being becomes mad after material sense enjoyment. So this is the glory of Srimati Radharani, that she, and only by her mercy can we experience love of Krishna. Without her mercy, all we can do is try to, emanate love from our own heart. But Prabhupada said when that happens, it doesn't attract Krishna. So we might sometimes question, I've been chanting Hare Krishna for so many years and decades, I've been doing so much devotional service, but I don't feel like I'm attracting Krishna. I don't feel his reciprocation. And the answer is, we have to turn from trying to make it that I'm offering love from my heart to Krishna, to I'm attracting Radharani's mercy so that her Shakti, her loving potency, her love evolving nature can reflect from my heart back to Krishna. Then one actually experiences the transcendental bliss of love of God. So we'll stop there. There's a few other points that could be made. If there's any quick question or comment or discussion before we serve Radharani's feast. Very good. How do we attract Radharani's mercy? Thank you. That brings up a quote that I actually wanted to share. And here's a quote that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says. You want to know what Bhaktisiddhanta says? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, Srimati Radharani is the sole custodian of all matters pertaining to Krishna's pleasure. If anyone comes forward to help her, she becomes filled with gratitude. In other words, Radharani is the sole custodian of the potencies of Prince Krishna. If we do anything, however tiny, however insignificant it is, to assist her in pleasing Krishna, she becomes so grateful that she reciprocates by bestowing upon us her living potency so that we can experience the love of Krishna. And the spiritual master Prabhupada says is a representative of Radharani. So if we try to please the spiritual master, who's the representative of Radharani, then Radharani becomes so pleased that she reciprocates with that insignificant fledgling love. And in that way, insignificant little us can attract the mercy of God. Thank you for your question. Srimati Radharani ki jai.
Today is also the 50th anniversary of His Holiness Dr. Radhasathami Guru Maharaj taking sannyas, and that makes him the oldest sannyasi, not in years, but not in age, but in number of years of maintaining the sannyas ashram in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, not just this kind, but the whole Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So we, as his disciples, are asking for the good wishes of the devotees that he can continue to serve Srila Prabhupada, his preaching and fulfilling the many instructions that he got.
Hare Krishna.